So today I want to introduce to you Emily Baton, who I know I always pronounce your last name wrong. But she's a postdoc fellow from the May Institute, and where she does work both in consultation with schools, but also they run a PBIS center there and do a variety of kinds of training for school teams that are implementing a multi-tiered model. But her area of emphasis during her graduate studies and even now has always been looking at families, engaging with families, and supporting families. She's also a BCBA, and we're very excited to have her here today to talk about family engagement in Tier 1. So I'll turn it over to you, Emily.
Thank you, Karen. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate that you hit on my background as well, because one of the things that I like to say just a little bit about myself is I went from being from the consultation model of working as an analyst, talking to schools, to now being in the school and having that different perspective. And one of the things that really got me into doing this work is when I was a behavior analyst, I was constantly working with families, and we were constantly figuring out how we could build family school partnerships. And I had a meeting with one of the professors at the University of South Florida, and she said, "That's called family school partnership. That's a dissertation." So I just wanted to acknowledge that this is work that can be done on a day-to-day, but it's also this big umbrella and big conversation, and something that can take us moments of time throughout our school year to focus on. And so just something to keep in mind as we go through this is sometimes it's that individual connection point, and sometimes it's this larger umbrella that we have to come together and really think about ways to incorporate family engagement. Next slide, please. Perfect. So our objectives today, we're going to focus on expanding on that wonderful presentation by Kat from the Florida PBIS project, and where she focused on the process of community engagement and how your leadership team's role in planning to make those connections. Today specifically, we're going to focus on family engagement, really thinking about what that topic and conversation means when we're engaging with families. We're going to talk about some of those challenges that come up and hinder family school collaboration. We're going to discuss practical ways that we can embed family school partnerships and family engagement within your PBIS framework, where you may already have some thoughts in some areas that you're working on, or different ways that we can add that in. And then just really highlighting the ways that family can support and take an active role in engaging with your school community. I do just want to take a moment here before we go on to the video that I'm about to show. And when I say family for family engagement, I just want to take a moment to break that term apart and just go into a bit about what I'm going to use kind of that umbrella term for in our conversation today. When we're using the term family, absolutely, it could be individuals that are caregivers, it could be foster parents, it could be single parents. There's a lot of different individuals who may encompass that term. And so that can be something that we need to take a step back for as we're creating different materials and having different conversations and thinking about who's a part of your community and what family and that engagement means. So as we go through, I'm going to use the term family as that umbrella term, but again, just take a moment to break that apart within your school community and consider what families might look like. So I want to take this moment before I have Karen show this video at the beginning here and just take you back in time. I was working as an analyst, and I was working with a family, and we were teaching a child to play different board games. And I'm about to show a scenario that's very similar to what I would experience. So Karen, would you mind just having that video start? Oh. No worries. I can also talk it through. So this lovely individual is replicating a conversation that she has with her daughter. And her daughter goes, "I have ice powers, pew, pew." And the other child that's in the room goes, "Well, I have a magical shield." And the first child goes, "Well, that's not fair. You didn't say you had the shield before I started using my powers." And the other child goes, "Well, I changed the rules in the moment." And so when I was working with families, one of the things that I kept hearing is, I don't know the rules of the game. I don't know how to figure out how to make this connection. And now when I've been doing my work with the May Institute, sometimes I hear that from educators or admin where they're saying, "We're trying to do this thing called family engagement, but I'm not sure what the rules of the game are. I'm not sure how to make that connection." So this was just a moment to start us off, just to have a friendly giggle, but also to think about when we play board games, we have that rule book. But sometimes we might have family rules. So for example, with Monopoly there, you might have a family rule that when you lose money in the game, it goes into free parking. And when you land on it, you get that money back. That's a family rule. That may or may not be how another family plays Monopoly. When we're talking about family engagement, it's just really important to think about there is no rule book for it. So you may be coming from different perspectives, trying to play the same game and not playing it in the same exact space. Same thing with Uno, Candyland. There's so many different ways that those games can be played within different households. So we really just want to think about when we're building our framework and we're talking about engaging with families, how can we really make our expectations? How can we make that communication clear? How can we make sure that we're on the same page and we're playing the same board game? Next slide, please. So again, just creating some common language for the presentation today. When we're talking about family engagement, I just want to take a moment to define it. There's a lot of different ways that we can define family engagement. And so for the simple answer and for our conversation today, it's the interactions between schools and families. It's continuous across a child's lifespan, but also taking a moment to speak to my schools that are in the secondary, thinking about how that can change. For example, when a student starts to get older, we're thinking about those moments where they may be wanting to take more of an independent role. And so families step back a little bit. How can we balance that conversation of wanting them to be involved, but also wanting our students to have that independence and growth? We also can think about our kindergarten or first grade classrooms where those families are so excited to be there that they're like in every moment of our day. And we can see how those changes across that child's lifespan. However, it's still important that we connect with families at all ages. And as we go through today's presentation, something to consider too is how can we promote positive interactions? How can we really, again, set that rule book up so that we're playing off of the same board game? So just a small reminder, thinking back to Kat's presentations, you've already been talking about two-way communication, preferred language, thinking about that meaningful connection and providing easy access and securing ongoing participation. So again, as we talk today, just thinking back to that presentation and some of those strategies that have already been discussed. I also wanted to take a moment because in Massachusetts, this is something that comes up with the schools that I work with all the time, which is how can family engagement be organized within my PBIS system? And a lot of times we see what's happening on the right here, that there's these different silos. There's school climate we're thinking about PBIS, we're thinking about family engagement. And this is just a reminder that we really want to think about how can we integrate those different concepts together and really thinking back to our circles with our systems, our data, our practices, and really use those as ways to springboard and make that collaboration with family engagement. This shouldn't be something that we're thinking again in its separate silo. We're trying to figure out how we can bring it into our existing framework, how we can support those initiatives, and how we really can practice this across those different settings when it comes to data, when it comes to practices, and when it comes to our system. So really thinking about that integration and those system links together. So I want to take a moment here, and I'm not going to belabor this slide, but I do think it's important to think about the different barriers when it comes to family engagement. This is something that typically schools can come up with this list really quickly. And feel free to put in the chat if I'm missing a couple. There's always ones that I add after doing a presentation like this. And I'd love for you to think about what are some of your barriers to family engagement. The quotes at the bottom I'm going to start with, though, before we get into some of those barriers, and these come from some of our schools here in Massachusetts. This is a quote from a student that said, "I would like to see teachers talk to my parents about my work and how I'm doing far beyond just my report card or a piece of paper." A really moving moment, thinking about how we need to not only think about family engagement, but how we're talking about it and discussing it with our students. And then another one comes from a parent that says, how can I build a partnership if they don't really know us? So thinking back to what your community is built on, what are those different connections you might already have? And then how do we, again, create that bridge or that partnership? Some other barriers that I just want to take a moment to highlight is thinking about deficit thinking. A lot of times we are taught to think about strengths, and we do that really well within our academic setting. Sometimes when it comes to family engagement, we're really quick to admire those problems. So thinking about these different barriers. We set up this opportunity and nobody showed up. We're thinking about creating this partnership, and man, we're only getting our PTO or parent engagement individuals showing up to these events. We really want to meet with those other individuals. Or it would be really great if we did this opportunity both in person and online, but we're struggling to get people into the room. These are really wonderful moments to think back to those circles and utilize this when you're talking about database decision making. Barriers can be something that we admire, but they can also lead us to making action planning or different ways that we can support our community. So if you're struggling with internet access, maybe we need to pivot and do a little bit more in person. Or for example, if you're doing surveys, you might have them in paper and electronically. So again, I really want to speak towards moving towards that strength-based approach and thinking about different ways that we can improve family engagement. We can spend a whole session just on the barriers and thinking about ways that it can be a struggle to build family engagement. But I really want to move towards, again, moving within your existing framework, but also building these collaborations and these connections with families. So the first area that I want to just take a moment to think about is empowering families and switching again to that strength-based approach and really doing some relationship building. Just a really simple reminder for all of us is avoiding using jargon and providing some background information. I was at a meeting last night where they were going through the rollout of PBIS for the first time, and they put up their slides. They had just gone through this training. They were so excited. And they were 4 slides in, and we had a really wonderful parent that raised her hand and said, I don't know what PBIS stands for. And so we had a brave parent that was able to say that. There may have been so many other individuals in the room that was going, I don't really know what this is, but I don't feel comfortable speaking up. So just a moment for us to slow down and acknowledge that, but also praise individuals that are willing to make that connection and be brave. We really want to think about, we do use a lot of acronyms. Families are also encouraged to take a leadership role. Many times within our school buildings, we really take a moment to think about our team leads, our admin, and encourage them with their leadership. We also can make sure that we're having those community leaders and figuring out a way that they can work within our framework. Another thing to consider is building off of momentum that you may have in your town or your community. I was trying to work with a school team that was really struggling with family engagement. And they were like, we have these events at our school. We've tried coffee mornings and we're just not getting a good turnout. So we sat there and we did an activity where we looked at different events that were happening in their community. What they found out was there was a potluck that was happening every Wednesday night in their school or in their town hall. And the majority of the town would show up. So they ended up meeting with their town mayor to say, can we have a table here? Can we just have a moment of time and figure out if we can utilize this moment to meet with our families? Thinking about that positive relationship, someone mentioned this earlier in the comments, which I was so excited to see, is thinking about ways that you can have those sunshine calls or moments where you're thinking about the positivity. Sunshine notes, thank you. We really focus on sometimes in our surveys asking families about when was the last time that they heard from a school and what was that phone call about. And many times we got the automated message that there was a snow day or that this event is coming up, or I was called because my child was doing something that I wasn't so thrilled about. So an initiative that some of our Massachusetts schools are moving towards is thinking about ways that they can do postcards home, positive postcards home, or within their acknowledgement system, thinking about ways that they can have students turn in tokens for a phone call home from the nurse, the admin, or different people within the building, because they're so excited for their family to know about what's going on. This also is something that one of our school teams recently had to have a problem-solving meeting about, because they were considering doing this, and then they realized that their school was made up of individuals that spoke 7 different languages. Not all of the teachers are able to speak those languages or be able to write it down for those postcards. So as a team, they work together to figure out what it would mean to be able to send those positive postcards home, but also thinking about meeting the students in their language. And so they were able to work with an interpretive service and some community individuals to think about ways that they could get that to those students in the language of their home. Another example is thinking about moments that already occur. So bus line is a really great one. We know that can back up really quickly at the beginning or end of day. And that's a moment that you might have to wave at a family to make that connection. And also thinking about different ways that you can make preferences available to your families. So here's just a short example of a preference survey that you can do with staff and with families and talk about how you can meet in the middle. Really thinking about those different ways. Yes, thank you for moving on to the next slide. I was just leading into that. So thinking about building supports, materials, or opportunities is really key. You can build off different things that are happening within your building, but also think about the opportunities that are available. One of the ways that a school recently was working on this is they wanted to focus on their tier 1 school-wide expectations and that family engagement. And so they made a bingo sheet during their school break that they sent home with families and had them play with their student and sign. And when they brought it back, the student was able to get a couple of points for their acknowledgement system. I also can't do a presentation about family engagement without putting up this image from the University of Pennsylvania and Pennsylvania education system that's just thinking about our language. It's really small here, but I'm happy to send that to Karen too. But really thinking about language you might use. So for example, instead of doing muffins with mom, it might be pancakes with pals, really creating that open opportunity for different individuals within your community. And when talking to Karen before this presentation, this was something that a couple of questions had come up around. So I wanted to give some space and talk about also moving from those connections with family, but also thinking about staff buy-in around family engagement and thinking about how we can do some skill building with staff. One of the things that we can start off with is sharing the why. We're really good about sharing the why when it comes to our PBIS framework, when we're doing our work, but sometimes those little pieces that are a part of our framework, we don't always take a moment to give them that opportunity for the why. So thinking about ways that you can share the why around family engagement, how this might be helpful for your staff. We know that with positive family engagement, we see that teachers and educators have better relationships within their community. They also report higher job satisfaction. We also want to take a moment to praise successes. When you're thinking about these initiatives, again, going back to that data systems and practices, really thinking about how if we're collecting data, we're sharing it out, how can we also celebrate those successes? It may be looking at attendance. We only had 2 families show up and now we have 10. This is really exciting. How can we really make sure that they're also potentially being involved in our acknowledgement system? So it might be, thank you for showing up for events, and we want to do a shout out on our social media page, or the next time we see you in car line, we might be able to give you a high five or have that connection with you and say, thank you so much for supporting this. Thank you for talking to your students about this. It means the world to us. Thinking about also providing staff with some tips and tricks around family engagement can be really helpful. Some staff you might think of immediately in your building are incredible when working with families. You're like, absolutely, Sam, whether it's a positive conversation or one that she's struggling with, she has so many tools on her tool belt. Other staff may be a little bit more uncomfortable, or they might have some anxiety. And so how can we make sure they have the different tips and tricks when it comes to family engagement and making those connections? How can we think about, again, those positive relationship building? How can we also build off of the momentum we have in our building? It might be a mentorship program. You might highlight champions that are doing this well and can share some of those tips and tricks. Or it might be in your staff newsletter. Hey, just a reminder, here's something to focus on the next time you have a family in front of you. So thinking about ways that you can, again, think back to that triangle and think about for your staff, you might have some that can read that newsletter and do really well. Other staff might need a little bit more support when it comes to making that connection and building those positive relationships. We also want to think about confirming that importance. And then thinking about some thoughts to take away from today. These are just 4 big areas that I want you to consider. The first is communication. We want to make sure it's frequent, and we want to make sure that it's varied, and we want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for two-way communication. We want to include families, their perspective, their ability to take a peek at materials, and we also want them to be a part of our database decision making. We also want to partner with them that might be thinking about different volunteer opportunities, different times a day, and really potentially leaning into opportunities that are already existing within your framework. And then lastly, thinking about data and outcomes. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So Karen put into the chat that family school practices survey for school teams. This is just one of those methods that can help you measure family engagement and think about how you might do some action planning or goal setting around this. It's really important to not only have moments to talk about the barriers, but to action plan and then think about ways that you can report on those successes as a school team and circle back to your community and say, these are some of the ways that we feel like family school partnerships can be really important. And here's some of the ways that we're utilizing these strategies, and look what it's doing for our school community. So take a moment to think about what might be a personal action that you might have around family school partnership or family engagement around your tier 1.
I think while we're letting people think about what personal actions they might be thinking about, or maybe even have already taken to engage families, I'll also open it up to any questions. So Emily covered a lot of things. So if there's anything that she touched on that you want more information about or that you have questions about, you can either put that in the chat or unmute and we'll let you share your question. I see a couple of people. So it looks like Lisa Shingler, one elementary school gained high rates of family attendance by feeding family supper. Food is always good. James has positive referrals. Their district numbers for that have increased dramatically, so they've been working in that. And Jennifer Nelson's going to commit to sending home one sunshine note a day. Love that. We see more attendance when offering food and fun takeaways. So, I mean, when you think about it, if you're coming after work, food is important. How are we going to, fit that into our schedule? If it all comes together in one little package, then maybe that makes it better. Involving family students in events and venues. Yeah.
Absolutely. Students can be a really wonderful positive nag to kind of create that circle. So I think that's a lovely strategy.
Okay, well, if you have any other questions or ideas, you can certainly, Stephen's got one. A homeschool matrix at home. So taking your matrix, you have your norms, and then letting their family members kind of define what those look like, getting ready in the morning or during dinner or whatever family routines they want to apply those to. So and there's a little tip for doing that if you wanted to help families apply those to home settings. Okay, well, thank you so much, Emily, for presenting, and we're going to move now